I'm getting regular bites on this crankbait. Oh man, it's a nice one here. Stay on there, buddy. Stay on there. Don't get off. Stay on there. Stay on there. Stay on there. There you go. All right. These bass are feeding up really nice. And they're making me very happy. It's Dalton, everybody, and I'm out here having a great time this morning on a crankbait, catching some nice chunky spotted bass. If you're a tournament guy, these are tournament keepers. So far, about every one I've caught can be kept in the tournament. Throwing this crankbait, I've got the perfect crankbait weather. It's not fall yet, but it feels like fall today. And all I want to do is chuck and wind and catch as many of them as I can. Nice one here. There's a big old chunk of a spot right here. Nice spotted bass. Come on over here, buddy. Come on. Oh yeah. Nice chunky spot right here. Always got to be careful that I don't wind up with a hook, or I'm gonna have to do the hook removal on myself, which is pretty easy to do, but by yourself it's not a lot of fun. Nice chunky spotted bass right there. Got him on a crankbait. This is crankbait weather right here. So a couple of things about a crankbait. All right, this bill right here, if you've not thrown a lot of crankbaits, the bill is designed not only for depth, but also hitting something with it. You can hit rocks and this thing literally looks like it's hunting on the bottom. The key to a crankbait, and I'm not saying you always have to hit something to get them on a crankbait, because I've caught a lot of bass without hitting anything at all. But the key is this, at least for me. What I do is I cast it out, give it about 4 or 5 good cranks, and get it down to its depth, and it starts hitting things. Now once it does, I slow my reel down. Now I'm going to slow that bait down, because when I slow the bait down, I get better hook sets. A lot of times I'll get both trebles in that bass. So slow it down a little bit. The other thing is, if you get caught on something, sometimes the bill's going to hang up on a rock or a piece of wood. Stop right there, put your rod tip forward, give it slack, and 9 out of 10 times it's going to lift right up for you, and you can keep cranking. So when you're throwing a crankbait, you start hitting things, slow it down a little bit. Better hook sets. If it gets hung up on something, give it some slack. Generally, it'll pop itself right out. Can't always control what size fish you're going to catch, but what I do is I'm just kind of heading right on down this bank line, and there's a lot of rocks, and I'm banging those rocks with this Norman crankbait 10-pound test line, so it's going to get down there, and I'm just kind of picking them off as I go, just moving along. A couple of things on a crankbait. I know some people, they don't like throwing a crankbait. I love throwing a crankbait. It's but to me, you know, it's better if you have the right conditions. This is the right conditions for a crankbait. It doesn't matter if there's not a lot of wind. It's low light, cloud cover. They just don't recognize the bait as well. The other thing is, when you're hitting rocks and hitting all that kind of stuff, you get a lot of reaction strikes. You can always go back through that area later with something slower. I like to blow through an area with a crankbait, get as many bites as I can, and then come back through it with something like a jig. Just slow it down a little bit. The key to a crankbait is make sure you know your depths. You know, when you buy a crankbait, it's going to tell you how deep it goes. My rule of thumb, say I'm fishing 12 feet of water, I'm going to throw a crankbait that goes 15 feet. That way I know it's going to get down to that level and start bumping on the bottom. The other thing is line size. I tend to stay with 10 to 12 pound test, and if it's a really big crankbait deep diver, I might go 15, but 10 to 12 is pretty standard for crankbait fishing. The other key is your rod. This is a big deal right here, okay? You need parabolic bend. You need a soft tip. That soft tip, when you catch a bass with a crankbait, it's a shock absorber. It makes it harder for him to get off. The other thing is a largemouth bass, and guys, they've done this to me so many times when I was using the wrong rod. I had too stiff of a rod when I first started crankbaiting a long time ago. You got these treble hooks, and they don't quite dig as deep as, say, a single hook. So those largemouth, especially the big ones, so discouraging. They'll put their big old head up, shake it, and there goes your crankbait. And a lot of times that's because there's not enough bend in this rod to be able to absorb what he's doing. So there's a number of things to crankbaiting. I'm not an expert at anything. I'm just sharing with you what I've learned about it, and I've caught a lot of fish with a crankbait. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I really appreciate it. You know, the fall time, and right now, it's not fall yet, but these bass are schooling up. They know what time it is. So make sure that when you have mornings like this, or a day or an afternoon, pick up the speed. These bass are moving, and when it slows down, then slow down. You'll catch a whole lot more fish in the fall. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. Talk to you next time.